September 8th, 2350. Across the Federation, people gather to celebrate the 180th year since the Federation's founding. It is the largest holiday in the Federation. People gather throughout the Federation with family and friends to share food, drink, and watch spectacular displays. At the heart of this celebration are the core ideals of the Federation: peace, unity, liberty, and diversity. Values that the Federation has and continues to fight to defend. And for those living on the frontier, never has that been more apparent, with enlisted and civilian alike facing down an enemy who continually challenges their commitment to these values on a daily basis, both morally and militarily. The Cardassians fight ruthlessly, without honor or mercy. On the frontier, neither soldier nor civilian was safe, and while one may look to the skies above for reassurance, to look upon the mighty ships of Starfleet, this would soon change. In the distance, a storm was coming. For 3 long years, the Cardassians and Federation had become entrenched in a border conflict, the Cardassians fighting with an unparalleled stalwart resolve across many worlds in the frontier. By contrast, the Cardassian fleet remained scattered and forced to flee at the mere sight of technologically superior Federation vessels. But all that was about to change. Over the last 3 years, Legate Jazuk, the architect of the war, supervised the development of a new Cardassian fleet, one that could face Starfleet on equal terms. The muscle of this new fleet would be the Echo-class heavy cruiser. With a length of 377 meters, a width of 243 meters, and a draft of 63 meters, she is significantly larger than her predecessors. Yet it is still dwarfed by the Federation heavyweight Ambassador class. Yet its armaments were not to be underestimated, mounting 18 spiral wave disruptors, which had previously proved to be the only effective weapon against Federation shields, and 3 torpedo launchers, 2 prow and 1 aft. She is protected by new advanced shields and a dampening field, which works to diminish the accuracy of Federation sensors at range, making it much more difficult for the Federation to engage them at longer ranges. As well as serving as an effective base of fire, the Echo serves as a highly effective assault ship, with 5 large shuttle bays carrying a total of 12 shuttlecraft, able to launch quickly and support suborbital operations. Unfortunately, the Echo boasts this impressive firepower and carrying capacity at the expense of speed and maneuverability. So while it may match the firepower of an Excelsior class, it lacks the ability to keep pace with such a vessel. To compensate for this lack of agility, the Echoes would be paired with the new Kulinor class frigates, smaller and lighter than its heavyweight cousin, with a length of 266 meters, a width of 140 meters, and a draft of 51 meters, the Kulinor space frame takes advantage of the latest developments in Cardassian warp field design, and pioneers construction techniques that will continue to be employed in future designs for decades to come. Its armament, while light, remains potent, with 4 prow pulse disruptors, 7 spiral wave disruptors, and 2 torpedo launchers. This arsenal allows the Kulinor to effectively serve as a patrol and raiding vessel, able to engage most ships and escape from anything of superior tonnage. When paired together in squadrons of 3 to 5, the Echo and Kulinor cruisers were able to challenge Starfleet's previously untouchable dominance in the stars. While Starfleet intelligence was aware of the new classes being developed, they underestimated the scale on which they were being constructed and the increase in tactical capabilities. Rather than incrementally deploy these ships one by one to the border in small numbers, Legate Jazuk instead ordered that they go into action simultaneously in order to capitalize on shock value as well as the class's capabilities still being relatively unknown. As such, they would be held back from deployment and would go into action in Jazuk's newly planned offensive, Operation Mir Lusar, which translates as Cleansing Sandstorm, a trope of Cardassian mythology wherein the protagonist pays for his hubris as all that he has built is torn down in a sandstorm and his loved ones too are lost. Jazuk hoped that the Federation would soon share this fate. To further emphasize this poetic justice, Jazuk chose September 8th for the starting date. She also ordered a de-escalation in the run-up in order to lull Starfleet into a false sense of security. The result of this was exactly as Jazuk planned, with only a handful of ships on alert, many of which were only partially crewed, as many were still on shore leave. Meanwhile, a few light years away, 10 Echoes and 25 Kulanors were preparing to launch their attacks. The primary objective of Operation Mir Lusar would be to gain orbital superiority over contested worlds. The secondary goals included securing control of major trade routes across the frontier and interdicting Starfleet's movements between starbases and frontier worlds. The first Starfleet ship to be engaged was the USS Cook, a Miranda-class destroyer. Coming under fire at 0730 hours ship's time, outnumbered and outgunned, she was run down and destroyed by a pack of 3 Cardassian cruisers, but not before she could raise the alarm. This was heard by the Excelsior-class USS Fearless at 0815 hours ship's time. Captain Weber ordered the USS Stargazer, USS Saratoga, to rendezvous with her in the Hackton system, hoping to make a united stand rather than be picked off one by one. 3 hours later they rendezvoused over Hackton 4. Soon after, a Cardassian squadron of 5 ships entered the system, 2 Echoes and 3 Kulanors. Weber ordered the Saratoga to adopt a position wide of the main pair to guard against a flanking maneuver, while the Fearless and Stargazer would stand their ground. The Stargazer, commanded by Jean-Luc Picard, was among the older designs employed by Starfleet, using components first seen in the 2270 refit of the Venerable Constitution class. Its quad nacelle design allows a vastly improved range and higher overall speed at the cost of acceleration and maneuverability. Measuring in at 310 meters long, 176 meters across, and a draft of 88 meters, the Constellation is exceptionally well armed next to its contemporaries, with 4 photon torpedo launchers and 6 phasers, although it has no aft-facing weapons. This armament is reflective of its intended use as a warp-speed patrol and interception vessel, intended to slow down any potential Klingon advance during the late 23rd century. However, she is remembered today for her impressive carrying capacity, boasting no less than 7 shuttle bays, making it extremely effective at countering Cardassian surface incursions. Fearless and Stargazer greeted the Cardassians with a barrage of 10 torpedoes. What was perhaps more surprising was the unusually poor hit rates by the torpedoes, with only 7 out of their 10 hitting the targets, the other 3 prematurely detonating or simply missing completely. And even then, some Cardassian ships suffered 2 direct torpedo hits, yet came out with their shields still holding. In response, Gul Kardak ordered the 3 Kulanors to break formation and engage the Fearless and Stargazer, while the 2 Echoes followed behind in a pincer movement. Realizing that their comrades would soon be surrounded, Saratoga swept in and engaged the Kulanors, allowing Stargazer and Fearless to break starboard The Stargazer then deployed her impressive speed and closed down the starboard Echo, fixing it with another torpedo barrage, allowing Fearless to outflank them and isolate them. Yet even as the first Echo was overpowered and destroyed, the Cardassians were swift to respond, and the second Echo was soon upon them, supported by 2 Kulinors, while the third kept Saratoga at bay. The Echo concentrated its fire on the Fearless, while the Kulinors isolated Stargazer. Already having taken damage from her first engagement, Fearless was quickly overpowered and her shields were broken. It was then Captain Weber ordered a retreat. Stargazer and Saratoga were able to escape, but Fearless was run down and destroyed by the Kulinors. While the Cardassians only achieved a kill ratio of 1-to-1 at Hackton, it was a vast improvement compared to the past 3 years, and overall the Battle of Hackton was an exceptional case. By the end of Operation Mir Lusar, the Cardassians had gained orbital control of 5 colonies, destroyed 4 starships, and driven 12 back to port with heavy damage. Throughout the Cardassian Union, Operation Mir Lusar was proclaimed as a heroic victory, despite the overall territorial gains being negligible. More significantly, cracks had begun to form in the new modernized fleet. The true extent of the battle damage and attrition that the new ships had suffered was not realized till long after. This was a result of this new fleet being deployed before they could be fully tested, and as a consequence, more than 70% of the fleet was recalled to port for repairs and upgrades, leaving Cardassia's new conquests vulnerable. Meanwhile, news of Starfleet's humiliating defeat spread like wildfire and sparked public outrage and demonstrations across the Federation, and just 1 week after the Battle of Hackton, Admiral Jameson stepped down as Commander-in-Chief. The day after, an emergency session was held at the Federation Council, where President Marie Berthier gave a speech adopting a firmer stance on Cardassian policy, proclaiming, "Yesterday, as many of you know, the CNC gave me his resignation. I will say to you what I said to him. We have all failed. Yesterday we paid the price for that failure. For 3 years of hubris, as a people we have become entitled. We expect peace, we expect liberty, but we have forgotten the price. And now the opposition is saying that we were wrong to view the Cardassians as a child civilization, and that we should try to negotiate with them like reasonable adults. But I ask you, are these reckless and aggressive attacks the actions of a reasonable people? No! If we are to bring the Cardassians to the table, we must make them learn their lesson, and that actions have consequences." Soon after, a new Commander-in-Chief came in, Admiral Savard, who advocated a more consistent and firm policy towards Cardassian aggression. Along with these changes in policy, a new task force was created to spearhead this approach. A total of 20 ships, led by the Ambassador-class USS Horatio, under the famous captain Alina Nechayev, who even then had developed a reputation for a cool, dispassionate approach and decisive decision-making. While the task force was ready by October 2nd, other events resulted in the counteroffensive being delayed. On September 27th, the Cardassians, as part of their victory celebrations, paraded captured Starfleet officers before the cameras and broadcast their triumphant message across the quadrant. But more significantly than the further humiliation of Starfleet was a message secretly sent by one of the Andorian prisoners, who used his antennae to sign a simple message. One word: torture. With this, Starfleet realized that their pre-existing defense plans were compromised, as none of their officers had received interrogation resistance training, and as such had likely given up any sensitive information. Therefore, Starfleet was forced to revise its defense strategy and redeploy the fleet, and long-term would look into interrogation resistance training. This decision proved fortuitous for Starfleet, as when on October 11th, the Cardassians attempted to annex Minos Corva and cut Starfleet off from the frontier. They were ready. A Cardassian fleet of 11 ships, 3 Ekor, 6 Kulinor, and 2 Bretnock arrived in the system, only to be greeted by 7 Starfleet ships, including the USS Horatio, 2 Cheyenne-class cruisers, 3 Excelsiors, the USS Cairo, USS Lakota, and USS Repulse, and the New Orleans-class USS Rutledge. Nechayev ordered the 2 Cheyennes to press the Cardassian flank, while the rest commenced a torpedo exchange. The Cardassian commander, Jagol Prekor, had ordered a return salvo. Unfortunately, this exchange would play out in the Federation's favour, as they concentrated torpedo fire on just one of the Ekors, and so even with the dampening field, the Ekor-class Sharesh was struck by 10 photon torpedoes. The first 8 battered down her shields, while the final 2 destroyed her utterly. This was a shock to Prekor, but he hoped to fare better at closer ranges. Unfortunately, he had neglected to close formation, allowing the 2 Cheyennes an opening, attacking the starboard flank of the formation and catching 2 Kulinors without the support of the Sharesh, and they were outgunned, with one being disabled and the other retreating. This then led to one of the support ships to become exposed, and this forced Prekor to turn his flagship to protect the supply ships. Nechayev, seeing the gap between the 2 remaining Ekors, ordered the Cairo to lead the Excelsior line to charge the gap, whilst Horatio and Rutledge fixed them from the front. Prekor now found himself becoming rapidly encircled and ordered his group to make a turn to break the encirclement before the Excelsiors could cut off their retreat. In doing so, he disabled the Cairo, which attempted to cut him off. Meanwhile, the other Ekor group became isolated and surrounded. While the Kulinors escaped, the Zerkut was surrounded and disabled. Nechayev then ordered the ships to be boarded before the Cardassians could scuttle them. This was the first time the Federation had captured ships of the new classes, and it was hoped that they would be used to better understand the Cardassian strength and weaknesses. For her actions, Captain Nechayev was promoted to Commodore, and she would go on to become one of the most famous admirals of the 24th century. By contrast, Legat Jazuk suffered an unfortunate turn of fate after an assassination attempt on Gultar Obrek. She was among the officers implicated, and she was purged from her position. This effectively immobilized the Cardassian forces on the frontier for the next few months, yet life on the frontier would be no less violent. Since the border war began, Federation and Cardassian communities had become increasingly insular and cautious of one another. Yet no significant violence had taken place. This changed when on January 8, 2351, a Federation civilian transport was destroyed by a bomb. A Cardassian civilian named Zrai Sudat claimed responsibility in a public message. As Cardassians, our first loyalty is to the state, and we as citizens, regardless of where we live or what we do, must be ready to fight and die for the Union. Every Cardassian man, woman and child must take up arms against these alien usurpers. Whether or not this message initially resonated with Cardassian civilians is unclear, but it most certainly sparked paranoia and fear among Federation citizens, and xenophobic riots broke out. Cardassian homes and businesses were vandalized and attacked. Many Cardassians were attacked in the street, and local authorities struggled to deal with the violence. This prompted more bombings from an ever-increasing number of militant Cardassians, further escalating the violence. Eventually, Starfleet was called in to put a stop to the violence, and while for the time being it had replaced the facade of civilization, in reality, Starfleet had simply placed itself in the crosshairs of both sides. Throughout 2351, it was not the Cardassian fleet which had manoeuvred Starfleet, but Cardassian insurgents who conducted numerous attacks across the frontier from Salva to Ranara. These attacks could happen any place at any time, and while not all Cardassians were involved, it could be carried out by any Cardassian. And soon a silent, unspoken terror set in across the frontier, and it became increasingly clear to Starfleet that defeating an enemy and winning a war were not the same thing. The only question on the minds of both Federation and Cardassian alike: who would be the first to break in this war of wills?